My friends, today I'm going to talk to you about overcoming prejudice. We live in a day and age where everyone wants to be a social justice warrior. Today, in these days, there's a hyper-awareness of prejudice. Many times you see people trying to associate prejudice to things that are completely benign. You see people trying to attribute prejudice in places where it doesn't even exist. We live in a culture that is almost like a farcical form of the victim Olympics, where everyone wants to find their identity in being a victim, where everyone finds pride in being more oppressed than the next person. Here on the MDmedic Podcast, and in the broader expanse of the red pill community, we tend to avoid the mindset of victimhood. We don't believe in things that take power away from us, and we refuse to, in any circumstance, see ourselves as victims. However, there are times that prejudice is very real. The reason why I'm doing this episode is one of my fans. Her son reached out to me. He said that he's in middle school, and as a kid of color in a predominantly white Midwestern town, he's having issues fitting in at his school. He feels like he's being oppressed. He feels like people are prejudiced against him. And so this episode is to address this young kid situation, this teenager, but also to address anyone who might be in a situation of real prejudice. And it's not just a black versus white thing. It's not just a, male versus feminist thing. It's not just the stereotypical things that we go through. It could be, societal and class prejudice and different things like that. Prejudice is not only a racial thing, but it can exist in many different identities and many different forms. But I wanted to make this episode to address how to overcome prejudice when it is real. And I think dealing with prejudice starts with your mindset. I think it starts with not searching for prejudice in everything, not searching for ways to be a victim. And that prejudice is a diagnosis of exclusion, if I'm using medical terminology, meaning that after you have explored every other avenue, it is the only logical reasoning that is left. That's where you should see prejudice. I think the first thing that you should see is that everything in your life that happens to you, good or bad, is completely your fault. It's a direct result of your actions because that mindset gives you the most power. But in situations where you know that you've done everything right and that people are fundamentally against you for whatever reason, be it your religion, be it the color of your skin, be it your gender, be it the class that you grew up in, the socioeconomic status that you have, the neighborhood that you're from. In those cases where there is real prejudice, I'm going to tell you how to deal with it. In general, if there's an ideology that is defined as seeing you as an inferior, the way that you conquer this ideology is by becoming a superior in every single way. In this young kid's example, if he feels like he's in a situation where he's the minority in a school or academic environment, and you feel persecuted, you feel like people are automatically seeing you as inferior, as more stupid, as more incapable, the way that you overcome this is you become the intellectual superior in every single aspect. Even if people are oppressing, even if people are assuming that you're going to fail, even if people are actually trying to make it more difficult for you, if you overcome their expectations, if you, despite the prejudice, despite the adversity, still get better grades than everyone else, have better levels of understanding and better levels of comprehension, and even go further to learn more than is required, and you become more of a subject matter expert than all of your peers, then it is impossible for them to see you as an inferior. And if anything, their own churlishness, their own malice will be set in their lap when, despite all the things they're doing against you, you still have come out on top of them. They will be confronted with the stark reality of their inferiority, that if, despite everything that is against you, you are still better than them, what does that make them? If you are truly the inferior that they say that you are, and by them treating you like that and making your life harder, you are still able to be better than them, that makes them the inferior in their own mind. If it's in a professional atmosphere, if it's in a capacity for professional competency, that you see prejudice. If you're in a workplace and they feel like because you are of XYZ identity, whether that's black or whether that is a person who believes in God in a primarily atheistic environment where people think that they are too high and mighty in their minds to believe in a creator, whether it is you are in a female dominated or male dominated workplace and you are the opposite gender, whatever reason, or you are in a very traditionally caste system, social status kind of profession, you didn't come from the high class background, and people are judging you, people are doubting if you fit in, people are wondering if you can actually fill the role that you are in. The way that you overcome even this is to be superior. You must become the pinnacle of superiority. You must be the best. You must learn the most. You must get more certifications than everyone else. You must be able to do the things that no one else can do, to prove yourself to them, but most importantly, to prove yourself to you. You see, the real power of prejudice is not how other people see you. The detrimental power of prejudice is when you start seeing yourself as an inferior. That is why you must go even harder to be better than everyone else who doubts you, to prove not only to them, but to prove to you. Once again, the stark reality of people trying to oppress you and seeing you as an inferior, but yet you still achieving more than they have, will have to set in when you just become the elite, when you become better than them in every way despite. A personal example from my life, and anyone who has worked with me at this certain agency when I was a paramedic here can attest to this. I am one who hates to attribute any sort of racial prejudice or racism to anyone's motives. I would much rather believe that if someone doesn't like me, or if someone is against me, or if I am not seen in a proper light, then it is more so due to a fault of my own rather than prejudice, because I refuse to be a victim. I hate to even think like a victim, but in this case, it absolutely was. In my very first position as a paramedic where I worked, I was a very high performer. I had some very, very sick patients frequently. I was known as a SHIT magnet because I would just seem to attract the sickest, most critically injured patients and in all of the 911s that I would go on. And despite that, my patients did exceedingly well. I had tons and tons of success stories of being able to salvage patients from the very grips of death. The people that worked with me were all like, though this guy is a new paramedic, he's very confident, he's very skilled, he's very smart in what he does. And the volunteer firemen in the county were all very happy to see me show up on scene because they knew that the scene would be handled in a very confident and a very organized way by someone who is very much capable of proficiency. However, despite that, higher up in the organization and in the overall EMS community of the region, I was not well liked. I was one of the only black paramedics. I was definitely the youngest paramedic in the place. And it was a very much a hierarchical ego-stroking system where essentially the people who have been doing it for a long time, whether they were good or bad, they expected to be bowed down to by the younger people. They expected to be seen as gods. They expected to be ultimately reverenced as a superior. And they did not take too kindly to someone being younger than them, looking different than they did, being more competent than them. And there was definitely an intimidation factor when people who had been doing the job for much longer had to confront the fact that someone is being so successful, having just gotten out of paramedic school, being new to the area, being not even from there, being of a much different skin tone than everyone else. And so I faced legitimate persecution. I had, even in a situation where I had a patient that was in cardiac arrest due to a respiratory cause, I get on scene, I perfectly intubate this patient, I get pulses back, I run this code, I get them back to the hospital, and even in the handoff to the hospital, I watch as my patient is intentionally extubated. The tube that was in this patient's trachea that was breathing for them was pulled out on purpose in front of me and my partner who saw it as well. And then they tried to say that I did it, that I misplaced the airway and that it led to a negative outcome for the patient, even though it was so obvious that this was a flagrant lie. And I had to even get to the point of defending myself to the administrators, and I had all the evidence in my favor to show that I did everything correctly and that this was a fault of the people to whom I handed off this patient. And nothing came of that incident, but still the fact that I had to be in the position to defend myself over something so obvious was terrible. I faced real persecution and real prejudice, but here's how I overcame that. Instead of wallowing in a victim mentality of saying, woe is me, I am so oppressed, this is so terrible, I'm such a victim, I said, no, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure that I am the smartest paramedic. I'm going to make sure that I'm the most qualified, most highly certified and licensed paramedic that in every agency that I worked for. And so I went to back-to-back schools in order to get my critical care paramedic license, in order to get my tactical paramedic license, my certification in neonatal pediatric critical care transport, and then even go on to become an MD. I wanted to make sure that I was always the best so that everyone who wanted to see me as an inferior had to meet directly my innate superiority. They had to acknowledge the fact that no matter what they wanted to say about me, I was more educated, I was smarter, I was more talented, I was more capable, I was more higher licensed and higher certified and more qualified in every metric than they were. And that is how I shut their mouths. That is how I silence my detractors. Because you cannot call me an inferior when I am obviously superior to you by every metric. So that is how I recommend you overcoming prejudice in the professional place, in the professional sphere. If there is a stereotype that is associated with your certain group of people, whether that's your socioeconomic class, your race, your background, your ethnic heritage, then you can be overcome even that stereotype of being a moral superior. Jesus in the Bible, in the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, his famous Sermon on the Mount, he basically said this, that if your enemy compels you to walk a mile with him, go with him too. And this was especially relevant to this time period because the Romans, who were the conquerors, the occupiers of Judea at this time, the Romans who were foreigners who thought of themselves as superiors to everyone, the most sophisticated, most elite people group, the most elite nation in the world. The Romans, who saw themselves better than everyone, they had a rule that they could force any person, any subject in any of their conquered territories to carry their bags. A Roman soldier could ask a subject to carry his bags with him for a mile. And so Jesus said, in response to this, if a Roman soldier asks you to carry his things for a mile, you go the extra mile. You carry his bags 2 miles. Because that shows him that no matter what he wants to think about you, no matter what he wants to assume in his mind about the barbaric Jews of Judea, that even so, even with all of his preconceived notions about their character, about their lifestyle, you are showing yourself in a position of moral superiority. Therefore, if you are fighting prejudice against you, I think you can take a similar lesson. If there is certain character flaws or negative characteristics that is attributed to your people group, do the very most to show yourself as morally upright, as a man of integrity, as a man of honor, even in situations where most people would have a lapse of morality, even in situations where there is an obvious temptation in front of you and a very low risk of being caught. You show yourself as a man of integrity and honor, and your actions will prove yourself to be a moral superior to those who doubt you. And especially myself, being from the African American community that carries a stigma of being, the gangster, the thug, drug culture stereotype, I go the extra mile to not present myself as anything resembling that. I make sure that I speak with the way that makes other people know that I am intelligent. I make sure that I carry myself with a moral foundation that no one even doubts my character. People that look at me and say, oh, he's just a black guy, he's probably not very smart, he's probably a thug, he's probably low socioeconomic status. People that look at me that assume that because I'm a black male that I am low socioeconomic status, that I am unintelligent, that I have criminal proclivities. I always show myself and how I speak to be more intelligent than those who even want to detract from me. I always carry myself and present myself with a level of class to try to imply a status that is rivaling and even, quite frankly, threatening the status of those who think that I'm inferior. I like to wear watches that are worth more than most people's rent payments. Not because I'm trying to flex outside of my socioeconomic class, but because I am trying to have a visual signification of the hard work and dedication that I have done to prove myself as an equal and, quite frankly, as a superior. One of the most pleasurable things is when I interact with people who make an assumption about me based on how I look, make an assumption of my intellect, make an assumption of my moral and socioeconomic status based on how I look. When I can speak to them in a sentence that they can't even understand with grammar that's way above their head, pull up in a car or with status symbols that they can't afford, with a woman that is more attractive than what they could get, and look at their face. Look at their notions of superiority fall away as they have to acknowledge the obvious superior that is right in front of them. And as I've said before in a previous episode, since the beginning of human history, the ultimate resolution of conflict that has been unmitigated by dispute, unmitigated by civilized ways of expressing disagreement and talking and committees and arguing, the ultimate conflict mitigation has been violence. Oftentimes people who feel threatened by you, people who feel threatened by your position, people who feel threatened by your place because they feel like you are an inferior that you're supposed to be and you're outshining them in every metric, they will want to physically hurt you. They will want to try you. Even if it's not in a fight, they will want to try to physically intimidate you. That is also why you must become a physical and combative superior. I always say it, you must become dangerous. You must have a dangerous, imposing physique that makes people not want to try you. But then not only should you have the physique, but you should also have the skill set, the combative experience, the martial capability to handle a situation, to be their superior in a physical challenge. Every man should study martial arts. Every man should know how to use his body and objects as weapons. And that will also affect how you present yourself in public. Everyone can see when a man walks into the room and when the man is dangerous, when he's perfectly capable of handling himself and doesn't have to say a word because he carries an aura. He carries a certain power. In the words of Andrew Tate, he carries a certain yoga fire with him. That's the man that you need to be. You need to have an imposing presence of physical superiority that does not have to be proven with actions, but can be if needed. If ever you're in a situation, you're pursuing a woman, you're trying to seek a woman's attention and affection, and her father or her family is against you for whatever reason. They have an innate prejudice against you, whether it's for your race, whether it's for your socioeconomic status or assumed socioeconomic status or anything about you. The best way to overcome that is by still, once again, being a superior. One of the most satisfying experiences has been in the past when I have been romantically involved with women who their parents felt a certain way about me because I am Black. And she expressed this, bit of apprehension about having me meet her father, about having me meet her family because of their, deeply held prejudices. One of the most fantastic experiences, one of the most satisfying feelings is when you go and you walk up to her father and you can speak in a way that is intellectually beyond anything that he can understand. You are more physically imposing than he is. Your obvious status, your watch, your clothing, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way your bank account looks, the way you present yourself as a human is superior to him in every single way. Your manners are better than his in every single way. This man has to be confronted by the fact that you are his superior. And everything that he has preconceived about you, you can just watch it shrink away. You can just watch this man who, as you approached him, he had such an air of hubris and vitriol in his eyes. You can just watch him fade away and shrink as he knows that he is in the presence of one of his superiors. There's nothing more satisfying than that. And there's no prejudice that can stand in the face of that. And even though he still may not like you, he has to be confronted with the reality that he is actually your inferior. You see, the mindset of being a victim is for pussies. As a man, you should refuse to believe in things that take power away from you. You must be a complete superior in every way. Because no matter how much people hate you, no matter how much people act like they don't like you while you're on the rise or you're on the up and up, when you finally make it to where you're trying to go, you will notice that there is a lot less prejudice that exists around you. Because everyone likes a winner. Everyone wants those who have been successful. The millionaires that are riding in Lamborghinis, no matter the race, they still get the attention of women. They still get the respect of the public. They still turn eyes and get people wanting to connect with them and network with them. Why? Because success speaks for itself. Success is the proof of superiority. And success is the disproof of inferiority. So refuse to believe in things that take power away from you. Make everything that happens in your life completely your fault. Because you are a conqueror. Now go forth and conquer. The world is yours.
Say, won't you, say it again, say it again, oh, 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 oh. Won't you say, oh, 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 won't you say, oh, 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 no, you want to, then just say it, no, you want to, then just say it. Won't you say it again? Say, won't you say it again? Say it again.